Hello and welcome to I Helped Make That. Last time we talked about a movie that Martin Scorsese does not consider cinema, Guardians of the Galaxy. So, funnily enough, we will be following up a Marvel movie with a Martin Scorsese movie. As today, we are talking about Casino with Ray Preziosi. What did you do on Casino, Ray?
I shot the title sequence, and also there's one miniature shot in the film that I shot as well.
Great. And I'm excited to talk with you about it today, but before we do so, let me just get the anchor ad out of the way. So, do you want to create your own podcast, but you don't know how? If so, try Anchor today because Anchor is the easiest podcasting platform to use. All you do is sign up for an account, then you can post on Apple Podcast, Spotify, all those platforms. So, if you want to create your own podcast, try Anchor today. So, thanks again for coming on, Ray.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, Ray, both sequences were created by the company Saul Bass. How did you get involved with Saul Bass in the first?
Well, I started working with Saul and Elaine Bass, which was a husband and wife team, and I started with them with a friend who I knew from New York, and then he moved to Los Angeles, and he was an actor, and then became a pretty well accomplished editor, and he worked with Saul and Elaine Bass. Stephen Sprung was his name, and is his name, and he's gone on to do things like not Star Wars, uh, Star Trek, and so he put me in touch with Saul and Elaine Bass. So the first project I worked on them with was River Runs Through It, which was a Robert Redford picture. And so I went to Los Angeles. I met with Saul Bass, and it was great coming into his office. He showed me storyboards that he had made for the River Runs Through It title sequence. And I'm looking at these storyboards, and it's like, I mean, usually storyboards are just like sketches of what you want to have on the screen, but these were like works of art. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, as a director of photography, am I going to be able to come up with pictures as beautiful as these storyboards? But of course, because of the support that they had given me in terms of production design, we were able to make those pictures look as beautiful as the storyboards. So that was my first encounter with Saul and Elaine Bass, and I have to say also, at the very last minute, Robert Redford had decided after the title sequence had been completed that he wanted to go with a completely different concept. So that title sequence never actually made it into the movie. However, to Robert Redford's, to his credit, years later, I did get to see him on a quiz show that he was directing, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Hey, I'm sorry I didn't use that title sequence." So it was a connection from New York that got me to work with them on A River Runs Through It.
Wow, that's a great story. Then how did that lead you to work on Casino?
Well, I suppose I impressed them so much as a director of photography that when their next project came up, which was Casino, and sadly, of course, that was their last title sequence, um, they brought me on for Casino. And so another trip out to Los Angeles. By this time, Los Angeles had kind of become my second hometown, and so I was very happy to come back to work with them on Casino.
Okay, so you shot your sequences in Los Angeles. So did they make up the set to look like Las Vegas?
Well, actually, we actually did shoot in Las Vegas.
Oh.
Yes, now what we're talking about, of course, is not the part where Robert De Niro walks out of the casino. We're talking about the part where we see the various colored lights of the neon lights of Las Vegas. And
Mhm.
so um, we shot some tests in Los Angeles prior to going to Las Vegas. And actually, before we even mention that, let me just say that working with Saul and Elaine Bass was such a tremendous experience because the two of them, people may not realize that the title sequences that they have done over the years, everything from Psycho to the first West Side Story, working with Otto Preminger and other Martin Scorsese pictures, Age of Innocence, and I mean they've just done tremendous work, and also with logos, Alcoa, the bill system, AT&T. I mean, just go on and on and on. So even though they had such tremendous success, I have to say, working with them, it was always like they were always proving themselves that they can do better and not certainly resting on their laurels. So it was just a great, unpretentious, just two people trying to do their best that they can. And so it was a great experience working with them. So with the title sequence for Casino, their concept was to shoot the neon lights of Las Vegas. But of course, being Saul and Elaine Bass, they're not going to do it like just get a camera and shoot the neon, right? They had to do something special. And so what they did was, in my initial meetings with them, Saul had a few special effects still camera filters. And what they were like prisms. They multiplied the image in various ways. And so they were little square filters. They did not have a metal edge around them like a round filter would have. And so we needed to put these little square filters on the front of our motion picture camera. And so the camera we used, my favorite camera of all time, of course, was the Panaflex, the Panavision Platinum Panaflex. And so we had to get those filters onto that lens. And so we went to Panavision in the Valley. Their main office at the time, I think it was in Van Nuys or somewhere. Right now they're in Woodland Hills as their main office. But we went to their main place and told them what we were doing and saying, we need to get these filters on one of your lenses. And so, okay, very good. And the thing is, though, they need to be able to slide in and out, and they also need to rotate. Okay, very good. And within a day, the next day, we went back to Panavision, and sure enough, they had built a rig to accept these filters onto their lenses. And so if you look at the title sequence, you'll see that part of the image is the actual neon, and part of the image has been multiplied in some way. And then some of the other shots in the title sequence, you'll see that there's movement. There's movement in the image, or it's rotating. And so all that simply is my camera assistant, Stacy Cohen, who did a brilliant job as a camera assistant, was just either rotating the filter or sliding the filter in and out of the front of the lens. And so, this was the days back in the 90s before computer animation and all that kind of stuff. So all these effects and everything were done in the camera. And so basically that's kind of how we were able to achieve the effects. So it wasn't just shooting the neon.
Wow, that is just amazing. So that was just for the title sequence alone, but what about the other shot you helped create?
Well, the other shot I helped create was the within the first 2 minutes or so of the movie. There's a voiceover talking about bodies being buried out in the desert, and what we see is a nighttime shot of Las Vegas from the air. Now, we shot this, of course, the movie was in the 90s, but the movie is a period piece, takes place in the 70s. So we couldn't just simply go and do a flyover of Las Vegas in the 90s because it wouldn't look the same. And so it had to be a miniature. And so there were some challenges with doing this because of we couldn't just shoot the title sequence or the flyover. It had to be a wide shot of the city, and so there were actually it was 3 trips for me to Los Angeles to get this, and so Saul and Elaine Bass in our first attempts they considered it to be some test shots. So our first attempt was just to show the city lights because there was no way to build a model of the entire city in miniature. So they just wanted to show the city lights. And so there was a map that they found of Las Vegas of the 1970s, and they made a codolith of it. Now, codolith was in those days, you may remember there were X-rays, right? X-ray films. They were about 18 inches by 18 inches or 18 inches by 2 feet, just a big piece of film that it would put an X-ray on. In this case, they were able to reproduce the city in a black and white form on this X-ray film. And so the city lights would be the clear part, and where there was no city lights would be the black part. And so we laid that on a table with a hole in the table where we could light it from below. And to create the shimmering lights of the city, there were some clear pieces of acetate underneath this codolith with black and red lines drawn on it that were translucent. And someone off camera was moving those lines a little back and forth to create a little shimmy in the light. So it just wasn't a constant light, a little movement in the light. And so that was laid on the table as well. I lit it from below, and the camera was on a jib arm, and it was a big jib arm. It was a Chapman Lenny arm with a Weaver Stedman underslung head. So the camera was backed off about maybe 10 or 12 feet from the table up high. And I basically floated the camera in over the city lights to create that flyover effect. And so I just walked the camera in. Right? And so the first attempt was just the city lights. And now we sent that to Martin Scorsese, or Saul and Elaine send that to him. And he goes, okay, looks good. Nice, good test. All right. But how about some clouds? Can you put some clouds in? Okay, fine. All right. So I get a phone call from them. Hey, Ray, come back out to Los Angeles. We got to shoot it again. Martin Scorsese, you want some clouds in the shot? Okay, fine. Fly out to Los Angeles. And we used a smoke machine to create the cloud effect. And so again, we shot it with the jib arm flying in with the underslung camera, and sent that to Martin Scorsese. And he looked at it. Okay, yeah, looking good. All right, but can you do it with there's no horizon. We need a horizon in the shot. Okay, great. So I get a phone call from them again. Hey, Ray, come back out to Los Angeles. We got to put a horizon in. And so we set it all up again. Also, the other note was the clouds were not well defined enough, right? Because it was a smoke machine that we use for smoking sets, right? And so the clouds were there, but they really weren't as well defined. So to create the well-defined clouds, we got some nitrogen tanks. And so there were two nitrogen tanks with nozzles alongside the camera. And at the appropriate time, the special effects folks let out the nitrogen and they created beautiful, well-defined clouds. It was really nice. And so for the horizon, we used just a flat backdrop of a mountain range. And so, but the mountain range moved. So as the camera approached the city and to fly over it, the mountain range, they dropped the mountain range. So it was up high. And as we approached, the mountain range came down. It appeared like we were going up and over the mountains and into the darkness. So now we got a mountain range, we got clouds, we got a city. It all needed to be in focus because whenever we see any wide shot of anything, everything is in focus. There's nothing that's out of focus because the lens is set at an infinity and everything's in focus. But of course, since we're shooting a miniature in a studio, we can't just set the lens in infinity and expect it all to be in focus. And so I had to shoot this using the depth of as much of depth of field as possible to maintain the greatest amount of depth of field, so that we did have to shoot it at a very high or higher than what you would normally shoot. You know, something like this T-stop. I think it was like a T11. I used a 40mm lens, which was slightly wide angle, which would help with the depth of field. And I also had a brilliant camera assistant, Stacy Cohen, who throughout this whole flight from the back of the jib arm flying over the city, maintained focus the whole trip. And so we did each take with my standing up with the camera, you know, and picture this, it's on a jib arm, right, which is counterbalanced. So the camera kind of just floats, right? And then as you operate the camera, you're just walking it into the table. And table is probably about maybe 3 feet off the ground or 3.5 feet off the ground. So I started from a standing position and walked the camera into and flying over the city. And as we flew over the city, the mountains began to drop. And so the nitrogen clouds, they set off the nitrogen clouds. I waited till the right moment and started and just flew the camera in. And so, and all of this had to be balanced in terms of light levels. There was no video monitor, obviously, to check that. There was a video tap, but you couldn't really use that for adjusting exposure. And so the take that you actually see in the film, I believe, was take number 64. And so there were a number of times I would fly the camera in and actually hit the table because, you know, your depth of where you are in space was difficult to judge as you're walking the camera in, your eye up to the camera. And so we finally got a take that Martin Scorsese liked, which was, I believe, number 64.
Okay, wow, that is just such a cool behind the scenes look at this movie. And I think one of the strongest things about this movie, and you just highlighted, you know, how it was brought back to life, is the direction. Like there's so many like cool cinematography tricks and camera techniques that are like used from scene to scene to scene, like that, and like just draws you in visually. But, visuals only go so far even if movies are a visual medium. And like even if it's not exactly even if it's not exactly narratively new for Scorsese, like the differing perspectives of De Niro, Stone, and Pesci make the movie also narratively interesting and sort of draw me in at least. Like there's never just one bad guy. Like it always seems to change from their perspective. Wouldn't you agree with that when it comes to both the visuals and narratives? Like there's always sort of that narrative switch and that's just sort of boosted by the cinematography.
Oh, absolutely, sure, yes. And one of the very interesting things about this particular movie
Hmm.
is that it's almost kind of a documentary style. I
Hmm.
actually and audiences learn quite a bit about just how they operated in the 70s, which I found to be quite interesting. And yes, there was no just one bad guy.
Hmm. Yeah, like they all sort of take their turns being the bad guy.
Yes.
Like which sort of actually makes it a bit different from Scorsese's other movies where there is that like one person who's like worse than the rest.
Yeah.
Here it's like they're all kind of equally shitty people.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, like but yeah, just back to Casino in general, like it's just sort of one of those movies like everything just sort of works well in its favor. The visuals, the script, the performances, except for maybe Don Rickles, who I think is a bit out of place. But other than him, otherwise A+ performances across the board. But I'm like, would you agree with that?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Performances were spectacular. Yes, and as far as the visuals are concerned,
Hmm.
um, with the title sequence once again,
Hmm.
um, uh, the flames,
Hmm.
showing the flames. At the very end, there's those flames at the end that we also shot um, at Saul Bass's studio. It was a cute little studio right there on Sunset Boulevard. It was tucked away. It was really quite a nice little spot there. Uh,
Yeah.
Say also that
Mhm.
part of this wouldn't have happened without the support of Paul Martin Films
Mhm.
and specifically Andy Martin, who
Mhm.
did all of the production support for the title sequence and also
Mhm.
for that one shot that we did,
Mhm.
the flyover shot.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just really cool just to find out like just why the visuals in this movie were as striking as they were.
Yes, yes, yes. And with the shooting the the neon, uh, just as a little thing that happened, along the way.
Mhm.
Um, before we went to Las Vegas to actually shoot it, we were able to find a small neon piece, like something someone would hang in their window, just a little neon thing, a little practice neon,
Mhm.
so I could practice with exposure and make sure we know what we're doing before we get to Las Vegas. And so I shot a bunch of tests, just shooting this neon, different
Mhm.
exposures, things like that. And we shot it at their Woodland Hills, Panavision's Woodland Hills, one of their stages, and we just
Mhm.
shot some tests.
Mhm.
So a couple of days later, we look at the footage, and disaster struck. The neon was pulsating, right? It wasn't like constant; it was like pulsating. I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to be a problem now. So we go back to Panavision stage with the piece of neon, And now I had like maybe 20 different combinations set up in terms of exposure, frame rate, shutter angle. So different shutter angles, different frame rates, different exposures, like 20 different variations to find the one that would not, to get rid of the flickering image. And so we put the piece of neon on the table that we're going to shoot with, and Andy Martin, who was with us, goes, "Hey, there's a little switch in the back here. What's this?" And so he switches the switch, and all of a sudden the neon gets brighter. And I thought to myself, okay, that's it. That's the answer. And sure enough, we shot all like 20 or so different combinations that for testing this. And we look at the footage, and there's not one frame of footage that was flickering, right? It was apparently, this piece of neon had like two settings. It had like a low setting and a high setting. And if you put it in its normal high setting, it wouldn't flicker. And so I couldn't make it flicker if I wanted to. And so that was a tremendous relief, knowing that when we got to Las Vegas, I'm not going to have flickering images, and which would have been a disaster. So when we got to Las Vegas, we met with the principal photography crew and scouted locations one night, and then the following night we actually shot the title sequence.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just so glad it worked out, and it, you know,
Me too.
yeah, led to such an iconic sequence in such a great film. Uh, yeah, and I think this is the perfect place to end it. But before we go, Ray, do you have anything to plug?
Well, actually, yeah. I would say if you live in a suburban or rural environment, you might consider joining the volunteer fire department in your neighborhood. And so it's a really good thing to do. And if you go to ridewithusfd.com, you'll see a bunch of videos about the benefits and the good things about becoming a volunteer firefighter, and just check out the web series, and you'll see that it's a good thing to do for the community.
Okay. Well, that was I Helped Make That. And Casino is on HBO Max if you have that. And all right now, and I'll see you all later.